Hello, everybody. Welcome. How are you all? Good? Okay. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? You can. Okay, very good. Good. I see the heads nodding. Good. All right. Glad everybody's here. My name's Tyler. I work here as the director at the Poetry Center. We're thrilled to have a big crowd for this reading. Everyone probably did something this weekend related to books. It was the book festival in Tucson. And so I'm glad that you're back. It's nice to see a big crowd returning on a Thursday night to the Poetry Center for what we do here on Thursday nights with poets. And we're thrilled to have our spring poet in residence, John Murillo, here with us, which has been a great gift. He'll be with us for a little bit of time. He's going to work on some new work here in Tucson. We'll talk about that in a second. But a gift to have John for an extended period in Tucson with us. So gratitude. There's a couple of things I want to say that are coming up. So if you don't have one of these calendars, they're a great thing to grab. There's some of these that are around the corner of this little gray wall right here as you exit out those doors. They tell you what's coming up at the Poetry Center. So two things I want to share. One is that coming up next in the reading series on the 29th of March, there's a reading with the poet Soretta Morgan, who has a first book coming out. And so we'll be helping sort of celebrate that first book here at the Poetry Center. That's a Thursday night here, 7 o'clock. With Soretta. There'll be a second event related to that that's going to be at MoCA Tucson, also free, and that's at 6 o'clock the following night on Friday. You can find these details about the second event on our website or on MoCA's website. And there's a section of Soretta's book that's a kind of choral performance, and so there'll be 4 readers in a kind of intersecting braid that will perform that part of the book together. So 2 opportunities coming up with Soretta, and that's again on Thursday, the 29th here, and then the following day at MoCA Tucson. Our visit from Brenda Lozano, the Mexican novelist that we were so thrilled to have come on April 11th, is not going to happen. So if you were counting on that, we have to pivot. We're going to reschedule that as best we can, and we're still working with Brenda on how we can adjust that and accommodate. So if you're planning to come to that, again, that reading is not going to happen on April 11th. It'll happen at a different time. It's for a good reason. Her new book is coming out also in Spain, and the publisher wants to send her on a tour of Spain. And I said, but Tucson, we can show you Tucson. And she said, but Spain. So we're going to find another time to get Brenda back here and read at the Poetry Center, which we're really excited about. All those details about what's coming up in this calendar are on the Poetry Center's website. Books are for sale after the reading, and those are available on my right over here. So I hope you guys will come and pick up copies of John's 2 poetry books, and those will be immediately after the reading. Those are for sale, and I think John's happy to sign them. So please avail yourself of those. If you've got any extra bucks, that's the thing to spend them on. And I'm really excited. I get to introduce John Murillo, which is a great gift, because the poet I admire very, very much. And so I'm thrilled to do that work now. And I want to tell you that there are a range of reasons to love our spring poet in residence here at the Poetry Center, John Murillo. Some of you might remember Murillo as one of the Poetry Center's Art for Justice ambassadors from the Art for Justice Project. And that was a project, it was an inquiry into the intersection of the imaginative life of language and the American addiction to incarceration. By extension, it's also about the human dimensions everywhere apparent in those crossroads. We're thrilled to partner with John through that project, but here are some other remarkable things to know about John. He's here this week and next, working on an introduction to a forthcoming collection of translations from the Spanish poet Rafael Alberti, which is forthcoming from 4-Way Books. He's also here working on new poems. They're finding their way as well. But this introduction needs to get done so that book can come out. With the poet Nicole Seeley, Murillo has put out a call for work earlier on celebrating the great poet Yusef Komunyakaa. And those pieces have been pulled together, edited, and they'll form a new anthology that's coming out this fall that's entitled Dear Yusef, featuring a chorus of poets celebrating their connections back to Komunyakaa and the great influence of Komunyakaa on American poetry. And that's an amazing book to look forward to, and a book to celebrate while Komunyakaa can also celebrate it with us. And we're really excited about that book's presence in the world and its soon arrival. But also, in partnership with Wesleyan University Press, Murillo has helped launch the Cardinal Prize for Poets Over 40 who are publishing a first book. Quote, a unique opportunity for serious poets who have taken their time and decided not to rush publication for the studious, rigorous, midnight oil-burning, patient ones who are finally satisfied that they have something worthy of readers. That's a pretty awesome prize, and it deserves a round of applause for putting it together. So if you've got a book and you meet those qualifications, this is your moment. And if you got a book and you don't meet those qualifications, just wait a little bit. Eventually you'll get there. So these are all reasons to be excited and celebrate Murillo's work and his interest in the field of poetry and in nurturing other poets, and his interest in lineage and forebears, but also in the future. But of course, there are also his remarkable poems, which are at once both a kind of lyrical mirror into which a reader might peer and see the complexity of the human predicament with all the influencing aspects that define it staring back out. Or this country, both the shine and the muck of it, or a kind of wayfinding masculinity that can at turns reveal brutality and tenderness, resolve and brokenness, like a nickel oscillating through the wishing well of how we come to know who we are and what we might be. Love and desire and grief and loss are everywhere apparent, their persistence despite what conspires against them. And all of this, what I think of as the heaviest imaginable freight a poem can carry, is handled with astonishing care and honesty and rigor in the poems, so that one recognizes the poet's dedication to craft. One recognizes the poet's dedication to craft, yes, but even more so, a dedication to the history of the art form in which he participates, and also to us as readers. It looks like I'm gonna cry, and I do love the poems that much, but really, it's a little bit in my throat. But the tears, genuine. That too. I think even in the poems, that's true. Thoreau famously said that God culminates in the present moment, a kind of inclusive theology that suggests both manyness and singularity, that suggests the power of expression and attention, but especially prioritizes those who are around, who are present in the moment to do the attending. It is a sentiment of the divine that celebrates the living. Murillo's first collection, Up Jump the Boogie, was heralded as the arrival of a significant new voice. Reading Murillo's Kingsley Tufts Prize-winning collection, Contemporary American Poetry, it is hard not to feel the many traditions that animate the field of poetry, culminating between its covers. Its manynesses, but also its singularity, the way the book references Elizabeth Bishop, or Gil Scott-Heron, or Dylan Thomas, or Larry Levis, or Keats, or Marvin Gaye, or the notorious B.I.G. They're all there, all filtered through the singular intellect of a visionary craftsman. I'm so thrilled that you are all here to help pay attention with me tonight in this present moment to one of my favorite poets. Please help me welcome our spring poet in residence, John Murillo.
I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I slept once in a field beyond the riverbank, a flock of nightjars watching over me. That was the summer a farmer found his daughter hanging in the hayloft and wished for the first time he had not touched her so. I wish I could say we were close, the girl and I mean, but only knew her to wave hello and walked her once halfway up the road before turning finally into my grandmother's yard. This was Ontario, California, 1983, which is to say there was no river and I wouldn't know a nightjar if it bit me. But the girl was real. And the day they found her, that was real. And the dress she wore, same as on our walk. Periwinkle, she called it. I called it blue. Blue with bright yellow flowers all over. The dress and the flowers, they too were real. And on our walk, I remember we cut through the rail yard and came upon a dead coyote lying near the tracks. A frail and dusty heap of regret, he was companion to no one. Stone still, staring, our shadows stretched long and covering the animal. She told me something I want to say about loneliness. Something I've since forgotten, the way I've forgotten, though I can see her face as if she were standing right here, her very name. Let's call her Dolores, from dolor, Spanish for anguish. And whatever the sky, however lovely that afternoon, I remember mostly the wind, how a breeze unraveled what was left of a braid, and when I tried to brush from Dolores's brow a few loose strands, how she flinched, how she ran the rest of the way home, how I never saw her after that, except when they carried her from the barn, her periwinkle dress, her blue legs and arms, and the fields ablaze with daisies. I spent the rest of that summer in the rail yard with my dead coyote, watching trains loaded and leaving. All summer long, I'd pelt him with stones. All summer long, I'd use the stones to spell the girl's name. Dolores, maybe, in the dirt. All summer long, fire ants crawled over and between each letter, her name, now its own small town. A season of heat and heavy rains washed my coyote to nothing, only teeth and a few stubborn bones that refused finally to go down. Weeks into autumn, someone found the father hanged from the same groaning tie beams, the hayloft black with bottleflies. But that was 1983, Ontario, California, which is to say the bottleflies are dead. So too the ants, and neither field nor barn is where I left it. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I gathered a handful of my coyote's bones, his teeth, and strung them all on fishing wire, a talisman to ward off anguish, a talisman I hold out to you now. Please, come closer. Take this from my hand. Hello. Thank you for coming out. Thank you, University of Arizona. Thank you, Poetry Center. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Aria. Thank you, Melissa, who had a birthday yesterday. Thank you, Claire, who had a birthday today. Thank you, Stefan, for turning on my heat in the cottage. Thank you, students who spent time with me today. Thank you, docents, for making this possible, and thank you, community, for coming out. This is a beautiful, beautiful experience, and I hope you enjoy yourselves. So I never do this. I'm gonna read something off my phone. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's not my poem. This is a poem by Galway Canem, who's very dear to me. And we mentioned him last night during the workshop, yeah? So I have a good friend who's going through a time right now, and this poem reminded me of him, and I want to read this, and I don't know, this is being streamed, yeah? Maybe he's listening. The poem is called Wait by Galway Canem. And I want to dedicate this poem to my friend, but also to anyone here who's going through something. Yeah. Wait for now. Distrust everything if you have to, but trust the hours. Haven't they carried you everywhere up to now? Personal events will become interesting again. Hair will become interesting. Pain will become interesting. Buds that open out of season will become interesting. Secondhand gloves will become lovely again. Their memories are what give them the need for other hands. The desolation of lovers is the same. That enormous emptiness carved out of such tiny beings as we are asks to be filled. The need for the new love is faithfulness to the old. Wait, don't go too early. You're tired, but everyone's tired. But no one is tired enough. Only wait a little and listen. Music of hair, music of pain, music of looms weaving our loves again. Be there to hear it. It will be the only time. Most of all, to hear your whole existence, rehearsed by the sorrows, play itself into total exhaustion. That's Galway Canal. Now I'll turn my phone off, as you all should do if you haven't done already. So I'm going to jump back and forth between the two books, and I'm going to read this poem, the first poem, in celebration of Arizona's victory over USC today. Pandering, is what they call it. So I was mentioning to some friends earlier that when I was in high school, I used to play basketball. I wasn't very good. I used to come out here to Arizona for basketball camp every summer. It didn't help much, but I wanted to be really good, and a lot of us did. And I'm going to dedicate this poem to U of A basketball, but also to the guys I used to play basketball with back in the day. And what do you need to know in this poem? I mentioned Grambling. That's Grambling State University, which is an historically black university in Louisiana. I mentioned the French Quarter. It's a neighborhood in Louisiana, in New Orleans. I mentioned the Illuminati. If you don't know them, you should look them up. And I mentioned Funkadelic. Parliament Funkadelic is a funk group. You should know them too. And I think the rest you'll get. It's called Practicing Fadeaways. On a deserted playground in late day sun, my palms dusted black, dribbling a worn leather ball behind my back, this loneliness echoes from the handball courts nearby. Nearly all the markings, free throw lane, sideline, center circle, rubbed to nothing. A crack in the earth cuts across the schoolyard, jagged as a scar on a choir boy's cheek. 30 years ago, I ran this very court with 9 other wannabe ballers. We'd steal through peeled chain links or hop the gate to get here, our blacktop Eden. One boy who had a funny pigeon-toed set shot and a voice full of church bells sang spirituals every time he made a basket. The other boys humming along, laughing, high fives flying down the court. And a boy we called the Sandman for how he put you to sleep with his shoulder fake or drop step, over 6 feet tall in the 10th grade, smooth talker with an itch for older guys' girlfriends. One Sunday morning, they found him stabbed to death outside the Motel 6, pockets untouched, bills folded neatly against his beautiful, cooling thigh. And downtown Ricky Brown, whose family headed west when he was 2, but still called himself a New Yorker, who never pulled from less than 30 feet out and could bank shots blindfolded. He went to Grambling, drove himself crazy with conspiracy theories and liquor, was last seen roaming the French Quarter, shoeless, babbling about the Illuminati's 666 ways to enslave the populace. At 16, I discovered Venice Beach, with its 1,000 bodybuilders, roller skates, and red thong bikinis. I would stand on the sidelines and watch the local ball players leaping and hollering, Quicksilver giants run and gun, already grown into their man bodies, funkadelic rising from a boombox in the sand. Now, all I hear are chain nets chiming as I sink one fadeaway after another. The backboard, the pole, throwing a long shadow across the cracked black asphalt. What the nets want must be this caress, this stillness, stretching along every avenue, over high school gymnasiums and deserted playgrounds, and the ambulance drivers drifting into naps back at the station house. What the boys who ran these courses wanted was a lob pass, high enough to pull them into the sky, something they could catch in both hands and hang from, long enough for someone to snap a photograph, to hold them there, skybound, risen. On confessionalism. I'll say really quickly, they're both mine, yeah? So. I don't know which one I've opened. I mentioned to some students earlier that I came to poetry, to the serious study of poetry, somewhat late in my young adulthood, I guess. You know, most people say they've been writing since they were 15, 16. I was nearly 30 when I started really taking this thing seriously. And I started actually, though, as a rapper when I was 11 years old, and then did that until I was about 22 or so. And that has nothing to do with this poem. I don't know why I told you that part. But I'll say this. All that to say that before I was a poet, before I was Professor Murillo, I had other lives that I've led. And this poem comes out of an experience that I'm not really proud of, but I think the writing of this poem has helped me process it. It's called On Confessionalism. Not sleepwalking, but waking still, with my hand on a gun, and the gun in a mouth, and the mouth on the face of a man on his knees. Autumn of '89, and I'm standing in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cocked, and staring down at this man, then up into the mug of an old woman staring, watering the single sad flower to the left of her stoop, the flower also staring. My engine idling behind me, a slow moaning bass line and the bark of a dead rapper nudging me on, all to say someone's brokenhearted. And this man with the gun in his mouth, this man who, like me, is really little more than a boy, may or may not have something to do with it. May or may not have said a thing or two, betrayed a secret, say, that walked my love away. And why not say it? She adored me, and I, her. More than anyone, anything in life up to then, and then still for 2 decades after, and therefore went for broke. Blacked out and woke, having gutted my piggy and pawned all my gold to buy what a homeboy said was a Beretta. Blacked out and woke, my hand on a gun, the gun in a mouth, a man who was really a boy on his knees. And because I loved the girl, I actually paused before I pulled the trigger. Once, twice, 3 times, then panicked. Not just because the gun jammed, but because, what if it hadn't? Because who did I almost become there that afternoon in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cocked with the sad flowers staring? Because I knew the girl I loved, no matter how this all played out, would never have me back. Day of damaged ammo or grime, they clogged the chamber. Day of faulty rods or springs come loose in my fist. Day, nobody died. So why not hallelujah, say amen, or thank you? My mother sang for years of God, babes, and fools. My father, lymph node masses fading from his x-rays, said surviving one thing means another comes and kills you. He's dead, and so I trust him. Dead, and so I've wondered years about the work I left undone. Boy, on his knees, a man now, risen and likely plotting his long way back to me. Fuck it. I tucked my tool like the movie gangsters do and jumped back in my bucket. Cold enough day to make a young man weep. Afternoon when everything or nothing changed forever. The dead rapper grunted, the bass line faded. My spirits whispered something from the trees. I left, then lost the pistol in a storm drain, somewhere between that life and this. Left the pistol in a storm drain, but never got around to wiping away the prints. So this next poem takes its title from a classic Bruce Lee movie called Enter the Dragon. Anybody know the movie? Okay, if you don't know the movie, that's your homework. You have to go watch it. So the movie is a Bruce Lee flick, but there was also a martial artist by the name of Jim Kelly in the movie. Now, in the 70s, Jim Kelly was a really, really important role model for a lot of us. All right? We didn't really see a lot of strong figures on screen. And Jim Kelly was this beautiful man, perfectly round afro, karate guy. And there's a scene in the movie where I think he's either walking down the street or he's driving, I can't remember, but he gets accosted by these police. These are crooked police that are on the pay from some henchmen, or they're henchmen of like a big mafia boss or something. And so these police officers surround Jim Kelly, and they're gonna, they got their nightsticks out, they're gonna do him like they do. But it's the movies, he's a karate man, so you know what happens. He beats all their asses, and then he jumps into one of the police cruisers and drives off. And I'm 5 years old, I'm watching this, and I was like, yo, that's great. This is where the movie starts. Enter the Dragon, Los Angeles, California, 1976. For me, the movie starts with a black man leaping into an orbit of badges, tiny moons catching the sheen of his perfect black afro. Arc kicks, karate chops, and 30 cops on their backs. It starts with a swagger. The cool lean into the leather front seats of the black and white he takes off in, deep hallelujahs of moviegoers, drowning out the wah-wah guitar, salt and butter high fives. Right on, brother. And daddy, glowing so bright, he can light the screen all by himself. This is how it goes down. Friday night, and my father drives us home from the late show. Two heroes Cadillacing across King Boulevard. In the car's dark cab, we jab and clutch Jim Kelly and Bruce Lee with popcorn breath, and almost miss the lights flashing in the cracked side mirror. Now, I know what's under the seat, but when the uniforms approach from the rear quarter panel, when the fat one leans so far into my father's window, I can smell his long day's work. When my father, this John Henry of a man, hides his hammer, doesn't buck, tucks away his baritone, license and registration shaking as if showing a bathroom pass to a grade school principal. I learn the difference between cinema and city, between the movie house cheers of old men and the silence that gets us home. Thank you. How y'all doing? Y'all good? All right. I don't know why poets do this, but we always say 2 more poems. It's never 1 poem, never 3 poems, always 2 more poems. So I have 2 more poems to read. That's the good news. The bad news is I write really, really long poems. So you're not getting out of here anytime soon. So I'm gonna go back to this book, the new one, and read something I forgot to mention. I should have done this before I read on confessionalism. Bucket is West Coast slang for a hoopty, which is East Coast slang for a jalopy, which is old school slang for a broken down car. So when I say I jumped in a bucket, it wasn't a bucket, it was a car I jumped into. I usually say that before, I forgot to. In this poem's Contemporary American Poetry, let me see if there's anything that needs explaining beforehand. And no, I don't think there is. Oh, yeah, there is. Don Scher, who I mentioned, was once the editor of Poetry magazine, and Plowshares is the name of another poetry journal, or writing journal. And that's all I think you need to know. Contemporary American Poetry. Another Monday, and you're out with some poets, one of whom, maybe you, has just given a reading, and it's summer, and it's Brooklyn, or it's the Village, and it's winter, and you've landed at some dusty dive bar, crowded around an 8-top to order wings, shots, and whatnot, when halfway down the table, you hear one poet congratulate a second on some prize or another, while a third sulks, sips his gimlets, and pretends not to listen. And a fourth mumbles something about not being notified his application was even received, and how you have to be gay or black or both to win anything these days. And a fifth poet pushes a plate of nachos toward you and asks what you think about the state of contemporary American poetry. And before you can answer, a sixth pries in, mishearing, of course, the last few syllables and waxes cerebral, something about Don Share or plowshares or maybe even timeshares. And on the television mounted, hanging overhead, an anchor woman's mouthing the muted news of another boy shot, dead, and black in some city now burning. and the police chief promises a thorough investigation. And a Yemeni woman is burning, splashed with acid for loving who she chooses. And everywhere you think is burning, burning. And yes, you hear a graduate student quip between slurps about a newly dead master. I tried to like his work, may he rest in peace, but try as I might, I found him too accessible. Another Monday, and it's summer in Brooklyn, or it's the village and winter. You're with the poets, one of whom, the political poet, the outsider poet, has brought along a selfie stick. You put your shot glass to your mouth. What's inside is burning, burning. Everybody now, squeeze in tight. Everybody now, say cheese. So, we had a class last night about radical revision, yeah? And in that, I mentioned John Keats's idea of negative capability, and which is really a mandate for poetry, but also for living and being comfortable with the unknown and taking risks. And it's something that I try to do in the writing. Not so much when I'm reading the poems, but tonight I'm doing that in this sense. It's a long poem, and I'm saving it to the end of a long reading, at the end of a long day. So I'm hoping you'll stay with me, yeah? Okay. So a little bit about the poem. My wife always says that I say too much to introduce the poem, but she ain't here. So, so I'm gonna introduce the poem. I was living in DC for about 11 years. And while I was there, one night in the early 90s, it was dusk. I'm walking down the street, and something flies towards me, and I thought it was attacking me. I thought it was a bat. It flies away, comes back, attacks me some more, flies away. And what I noticed, it was a bird, small bird. And it was coming and just really frantic, and then when it would fly away from me, it was flying to where there was another bird that had his foot caught in a closed car door. So that bird was kind of beating its body against the door, trying to get free. So the first bird was trying to get help. And it was DC, 90s, rough neighborhood. The only way that I could have freed the bird would have been to open the car door, car alarm would sound, somebody comes out the house, the bird's gone. So, I made a call and I kept walking. And the bird flew after me for a while, and then it just gave up on me. And when I first started writing poems, I knew I wanted to write about that incident. And I wasn't able to for at least a couple decades. Until I read this article about the jazz musician Eric Dolphy. And in the article, it said that one of his practices was to go into wooded areas, into parks, forests, and he would listen to birds, and he would try to transcribe their calls, because he said there was something earnest and honest in their music that he wanted to get into his own. And when I read that, it reminded me of the birds in DC, and then the poem started to happen. But it's long, so stay with me. And it has a bleeding title, which means the title bleeds into the text. I'm gonna hydrate now. And thank you for listening. Upon reading that Eric Dolphy transcribed even the calls of certain species of birds, I think first of two sparrows I met when walking home late night years ago in another city not unlike this. The one bird frantic, attacking, I thought, the way she swooped down, circled my head, and flailed her wings in my face. How she seemed to scream each time I swung. How she dashed back and forth between me and the blood-red Corolla parked near the opposite curb. How, finally, I understood. I spied another bird, also calling, his foot inexplicably caught in the car's closed door, beating his whole bird body against it, trying, it appeared, to bang himself free. And who knows how long he'd been there, flailing. Who knows? He and the other I mistook at first for a bat. They called to me. Something between squawk and chirp, something between song and prayer, to do something, anything. And like any good God, I disappeared. Not indifferent exactly, but with things to do, and most likely on my way home from another heartbreak. Call it 1997. And say I'm several thousand miles from home, by which I mean those were the days I made of everyone a love song. By which I mean I was lonely and unrequited. But that's not quite it either. Truth is, I did manage to find a few to love me, but couldn't always love them back. The Rasta law professor, the firefighter's wife, the burlesque dancer whose daughter blackened drawings with M's to mean the sky was full of birds the day her daddy died. I think his widow said he drowned one morning on a fishing trip. Anyway, I'm digressing. But if you asked that night, did I mention it was night? Why I didn't even try to jimmy the lock to spring the sparrow, I couldn't say truthfully that it had anything to do with envy, with wanting a woman to plead as deeply for me as these sparrows did, one for the other. No. I'd have said something instead about the neighborhood itself, the car thief shot a block and a half east the week before, or about the men I came across nights prior, sweat-slicked and shirtless, grappling in the middle of the street, the larger one's chest pressed to the back of the smaller, bruised and bleeding both. I know you thought this was about birds, but stay with me. I left them both in the street, the same street where I'd leave the sparrows, the men embracing, and for all one knows, they could have been lovers. The one whispering an old, old tune into the ear of the other, baby, baby, don't leave me this way. I left the men where I'd leave the sparrows and their song. And as I walked away, I heard one of the men call to me, please, or help, or brother, or some such. And I didn't break stride, not one bit. It's how I've learned to save myself. Let me try this another way. Call it 1977, and say I'm back west, South Central Los Angeles. My mother and father at it again, but this time in the street, broad daylight, and all the neighbors watching. One, I think his name was Sonny, runs out from his duplex to pull my father off. You see where I'm going with this. My mother crying out, fragile as a sparrow. Sonny fighting my father, fragile as a sparrow. And me, years later, trying to get it all down. As much for you, I'm saying, as for me. Sonny catches a left, lies flat on his back, blood starting to pool, and his own wife wailing, my mother wailing, and traffic backed now half a block. Horns, whistles, and soon sirens. 1977 summer, and all the trees full of birds. Hundreds, I swear. And since I'm the one writing it, I'll tell you, they were crying. Which brings me back to Dolphy and his transcribing. The jazz man, I think, wanted only to get it down pure, to get it down exact. The animal racking itself against a car's steel door, the animals in the trees reporting, the animals we make of ourselves and one another, flailing, failing. Stay with me now. Days after the dust-up, my parents took me to the park. And in this park was a pond. And in this pond were birds, not sparrows, but swans. And my father spread a blanket and brought from a basket some apples and a paring knife. Summertime. My mother wore sunglasses and long sleeves. My father, now sober, cursed himself for leaving the radio. But my mother forgave him and said, as she caressed the back of his hand, that we could just listen to the swans. And we listened, and I watched. Two birds coupling, one beating its wings as it mounted the other. Summer, 1977, I listened and watched. When my parents made love late into that night, I covered my ears in the next room, scanning the encyclopedia for swans. It meant nothing to me then, at least, but did you know the collective noun for swans is a lamentation? And is a lamentation not its own species of song? What a woman wails, punch drunk in the street, or what a widow might sing, learning her man was drowned by swans, a lamentation of them. Imagine the capsized boat, the panicked man struck about the eyes, nose, and mouth each time he comes up for air. Imagine the birds coasting away and the waters suddenly calm. Either trumpet swans or mutes, the dead man's wife running for help, crying to any who'd listen. A lamentation, and a city busy saving itself. I'm digressing, sure. But did you know that to digress means to stray from the flock? When I left my parents' house, I never looked back. By which I mean, I made like a god and disappeared. As when I left the sparrows and the copulating swans. As when someday I'll leave this city, its every flailing, its every animal song. Thank you.
Thanks again. One more round of applause for our spring poet in residence, John Murillo. I hope you'll come up and buy books. John, be happy to sign them, and we'll see you back at the Poetry Center to see Soretta Morgan on the 29th. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.